everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today for this session on Leading the Future, Insights from Influential Women Leaders. I'm Aude de Montesquoiou. I'm the Global Facilitator for FinEquity, a community of practice of over 9,000 members hosted by SECZim, dedicated to women's economic empowerment through financial inclusion. We have two hubs, regional hubs, one in Latin America and one in Africa, which is facilitated by DFI. And we're very happy that today we're partners for the content of this Pathway to 17 summit today. It's really a great pleasure to be on this panel with two influential women leaders with us today. We have Esselina Macome, who's the CEO of the Financial Sector Deepening Program in Mozambique. Bom dia, Esselina. And we have Farai Mpofu, who's the Director of Investor Education at the Security and Exchange Commission of Zimbabwe. Thanks a lot for being here. It's a great pleasure. So first, just to get us started, I want to say, why does this subject matter? If we go to my first slide here, I'd just like to remind everyone that women are the single largest underserved group of customers in financial services. There's an estimated 1.7 trillion financing gap for women entrepreneurs. And this problem is major, meaning that there's a lack of knowledge around serving women as customers. There's a lack of sex disaggregated data. There's a lack of analysis. So we don't know quite the size of the market here. We're missing tools and knowledge to understand and respond to women's financial needs, preferences, and aspirations. And then we have limited knowledge, skills, and incentives to build a gender-inclusive financial sector. In general, something we often hear is we have a gender-neutral approach. We're serving everyone in the financial system. However, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that when a financial service provider says they have a gender-neutral approach, they actually have a gender-blind approach, and they're not serving the needs of women customers. If we move to the next slide, actually, please move 2 slides ahead. And still one more. Just a reminder that actually the data we have suggests that when financial service providers focus on diversity and serving women's clients, there's evidence about greater financial stability in the financial system. It's IMF evidence, and I'll post it in the chat after this. There's evidence that greater diversity in the financial system at the leadership, board, and staff levels translate into better understanding of women's differentiated needs, than their financial needs, their financial aspirations. Having more diversity in the financial system, especially at leadership and board levels, also generates more innovation in the financial system. And then finally, financial service providers who actually pay attention to this need for diversity from management all the way down to better serving women clients, they actually do well for themselves. They improve their portfolio quality, they reduce risks. We all know that women have a greater tendency to save, they're more prudent borrowers, and typically they have lower non-performing loan ratios than men. Finally, I just want to say that at FinEquity, we've been working on this issue of leadership and diversity in financial services. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see that we've developed a guide that's called the Gender Leadership, Diversity and Leadership in the Development of Financial Services guide. I'll put the link in the chat in a few moments, but basically this guide really tries to highlight a few key tools that can serve financial service providers when they're trying to reach more women clients, when they're trying to diversify. You'll see there's a guide on why this is important. There's a few tools on why this is important, how to unlock the female market through more diversity. And then there are some concrete trainings, concrete tools that can help financial service providers have more diversity and better serve women clients. So with that, I just want to point that as a tool. And finally, just to invite you also to join FinEquity Africa and start sharing amongst yourselves. You'll have a QR code on the next slide to join FinEquity Africa. But the idea is really to share insights and knowledge about how to better serve women as women's financial service needs, women as clients of financial service providers. And to really allow them to gain more economic empowerment through the access and usage of financial services that are helpful to them. So with that, I'd like to turn to a panelist and first, again, very much welcome you. Thank you for being here, Farai and Esselina. And to get us inspired, I'd like to ask you to start with telling us one defining moment, sharing one defining moment of your leadership journey. What was a key lesson or a key moment that helped you, in your leadership story? Maybe Farai and then Esselina, please.
Thank you very much, Aude, and welcome everybody to our conversation today. I thank you, Aude, for setting the scene, for opening things up so beautifully for us simply to walk through and be able to share experiences and defining moments. And I'm going to be pulling at this question because I was reflecting to say, when I was younger, I believed in a single defining moment. Now that I'm a little older, I believe our lives are made up of things. Am I not audible?
Sorry, I hear with a lag. I'm hearing two streams, so we need to silence one of the two streams.
I'm going to be pulling at this question because
Aude, do you have SwapCard open?
when I was younger, I believed in a single defining moment. Now that I'm a little older, I believe our lives are made up of things. Am I not audible?
Sorry, I hear with a lag. I'm hearing two streams, so we need to silence one of the.
So I'm going to continue now, Aude. We seem to have caught up.
Yes.
And I think the lag was explained given the streaming that we are doing.
Yes.
Nevertheless, I'm hoping that we will be able then to tolerate that slight delay. So I was just simply saying, and to catch up with time, being a little bit older now, I believe that life is made up of never-ending cycles of defining moments. I accept that some are more defining than others, but I will say that based on my own experience, I am the story of an English major who exists in financial services and has spent all her professional career seeking to be included, to be relevant, and to be effective in a financial market space. So in many ways, I myself represent this odyssey to inclusion. So having started in insurance and then moved into banking, primarily for startups in the banking space. I mean, the world over, startups come with their own energy, their own set of demands. They call upon a skill set which usually doesn't exist, which you are creating as you're going along. And remember that the foundation of my skill set is not finance, is not audit, or any of the usual qualifications or economics. It is English. So in the process, you shift the entire trajectory of where normally you would find a person qualified in English, whether it is in teaching, whether it's in academia, or whatever the case might be. So that in itself was quite a bold move, and really to do with bold movements, decisive movements, and unconventional movements. Having done that, and much later in my career, about 20 years into it, I then became an investor in a microfinance company. I was invited into this vision by a woman who I had worked with and who I respected very much. I had never cast myself as an investor. I certainly never believed that I had the sort of money which enabled me to be classified as such. Nevertheless, I marched into this new role. I really didn't know what I was doing, but what I had was the passion and conviction. Again, these are signposts to any journey for any woman or any person who wishes to be effective in their chosen field. Having done that, there were plenty of lessons along the way and even more failures, which are defining in themselves or in a particular way. We often want to believe and to remove the fact that failures are not helpful. In fact, they've been amongst the most helpful developments in my own career progression. So when we speak defining moments, in my story, I include and I put in the center areas of huge failure and as areas of great learning. Ultimately, having experienced the three pillars of financial markets in banking, insurance, I now then am in the capital markets, but at regulator level. This is a lovely culmination, another defining moment. It's a culmination of the exposure that I've enjoyed in the financial market space. And my role being one of investor education means that having been inculcated into the financial market space myself, I am then uniquely qualified to be providing the same service to other women who may find that financial markets are inscrutable, obscure, opaque, and I am the one who's perhaps best equipped to be unpacking, encouraging, hand-holding, breaking down and demystifying. And that is essentially the role that I play at the Securities and Exchange Commission, where I'm employed, to raise the level of awareness in the capital market from the current very low levels of below 2% using one tool and 26% using another. And we have the ambition to raise this level to 5% by 2026, which is when the current National Financial Inclusion Strategy comes to an end. So a series of defining moments, but nevertheless, all of them relevant and culminating in this moment today. Thanks, Aude.
Thanks so much, Farai. This is really inspiring, and I like how you highlighted the importance of failures as areas of great learning. So thanks. Esselina, over to you. What can you tell us about a defining moment in your leadership journey?
Thank you for this opportunity and for being here in a very good conversation for a topic that is part of my one moment. Trying to answer to your question, which is really a big question that maybe we cannot fully respond in this conversation. But if I'm looking myself back in the moment and in the future, I entered to this space of financially in a very different way. My background, my education background was on math and technology, and I was fully at the university. I was never entered to financial space. And sometimes the governor of central bank invited me to be member of the board of the central bank. And I was really very surprised because I was not having any financial background, and I was not understanding why they want me at the central bank. And from that stage was clear for me that we sometimes frame what type of professional they needed to be in an institution. And I was coming from outside with other background to bring in that institution. And I found out that the big issue was how to use technology to improve payment systems. And I want someone who understands the technology and not only people that understand the business. And that was for me a great moment to be working at the regulator side. And it was at the time that I really initiated my passion on the financial inclusion strategy, financial inclusion space. And it's where now my passion is landing. So I did a lot of work on financial inclusion space, and I started to understand not just as a simple citizen, not just as a client, but understand how financial inclusion really can improve the development. And I remember when we initiate, we were talking about just having access to bank account. But today, when we talk about financial inclusion, it's really something that anyone, any country that you want to do development has to take into account. So I had the opportunity in this my leadership to be at the regulator side. And then when I was out from that position, I was able to continue my work on financial inclusion as a facilitator and as a promoter for financial inclusion. And also bring my technologies why I was in front of a big movement to have fintech in my country, to have fintech recognized within the whole financial system, and a new law was approved in order to include fintech. In that role, I'm working in the area of regulation, together with the regulation, financial institution, but also the market in general. So I see that my role in that space of financial inclusion, the leadership, has moving in a way that is a wave, if you can say, different stage of my life, and this is what is building. I really agree with you when you say that you cannot say that this is the moment. Really, life is making because for different moments. As now I'm speaking, I'm pension, I'm doing that financial inclusion, financial education, digital literacy, but at the same time, I am pushing financial service provider, financial institution to look to the gender aspect, because gender is also something that is now in my top priority, and being indicated mostly 2 years to be the chair of a bank, one of the big bank in the country. I'm pushing for that side also for the supplier, so that they see financial inclusion. They see what I can do for the women, not because we are the majority, but because world cannot be done by imbalance balanced way of thinking. We need to bring all to play, all to say, and all to participate if we want to see our countries develop. So this is my first initiative to answer your question, and I do believe that here during the conversation we can see the role that I'm playing, and really I want to see more and people doing their role to the development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esselina. And actually, I'm going to bounce on that and ask you both, how do you view the role of your institution in fostering financial inclusion for women, respectively, in Zimbabwe and Mozambique? Maybe starting with you, Farai, for Zimbabwe, and then you, Esselina, for Mozambique. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aude. And I drew so much energy from Esselina's share a few moments ago. And perhaps the background I should provide, Aude, is that as an organization, as a capital market regulator, we are part of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, for whom Secretariat is the banking regulator, Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. And membership also includes the Insurance and Pensions Commission. And the three of us form the National Financial Inclusion Steering Committee. So capital markets are a member of that committee, but it's acknowledged that capital market awareness is much lower than the sister peers in that grouping. So it's a privilege for us to be participating, but we are also very aware that we have many lessons to learn. But at the same time, we have the opportunity to leapfrog from the lessons that banking and insurance have had over a much longer track record. One of the areas in which we do leapfrog, and I'm borrowing from Esselina's area of expertise, that is technology and digitization of investment offering. Not necessarily just for women, but for all would-be investors. It's possible now, and it is in fact the norm for most retail investors, to use phone-based apps in order for them to effect their stock market investments and also their collective investment schemes or unit trust investments and other forms of investment. So we believe by going this route, we immediately democratize the investment space, which has over the years had an unhelpful characterization as being elitist, male-dominated, for the well-heeled, and for the urban, and so on. So the fact that mobile phone penetration rates are so high and that the data is generally available on women inclusion where devices is concerned, even if the data issues remain problematic from a cost point of view. But immediately it means that a sister in a field in Manicaland in Zimbabwe has the same opportunity to interact with the capital market and stock market investments than you and I and Esselina would have in this discussion. I also want to give an example where some of the education work that we are doing with inclusion in mind is in the form of a capital market awareness quiz for schools. You might think, but yes, what does this have a direct bearing on women and women inclusion? It does, in the sense that while our schools might be either co-ed or single gender schools, the point is that being able to interact with people who are during the age of, say, 13 to 18, which is the age for our high school, and being able to interact with them and provide them with awareness material on the capital market means that they become the type of adult that we want to see, given their behavior around money and their behavior around investments and their ability to influence national outcomes where the savings and investment culture is concerned. Our insistence as a regulator, as I'm beginning to close my remark, is that these teams reflect the item that you mentioned earlier, that these teams cannot be gender neutral. In fact, these teams must ensure that women, young women, are propelled to the front to ensure that their membership of these teams, their qualification for these competitive teams, is necessarily a managed process, which ensures that from that age they see that they are viable, competitive, required members of any financial markets team, whether it is participating in a quiz, responding to questions, receiving national attention, bringing a national attention to their participation in their schools. So we have found through this quiz that schools around the country are keen to participate. Girls are being pushed forward. And what is happening is, even in schools where there are both boys and girls, some of these teams are dominated by very bright and very strident young women who are keen to make their mark even at that age. Aude.
Thank you. And I'm just taking note here because there's several streams that I'm interested about. And I want to hear it, Selina, but I want to come back to this question of leadership. And Farai, I want to ask you a specific question. You referred to the role of technology, which is both a promoter, but I want to ask you also about the specific barriers that women might face. And so let's come back to this. But first, Esselina, how about you? What is the role of FSD Mozambique in fostering women's financial inclusion in Mozambique?
Thank you. FSDMoç Mozambique is an organization that is working in that space of financial inclusion as facilitator and as promoter. Our role within, we are part of the financial inclusion strategy. There is a new strategy, the second version just approved last week by the government. We come as a co-implementer of this strategy, and we are part of different workings group. So our voice is also hearing in that space. So I see the role of FSD also as someone or an organization that is even picking or trying to push new areas. I just give you an example. We come with the issue of climate finance. And it was a big discussion among our institution, and we did a study, and then we went to a regulator and telling him that the financial service provider, they have to do some things on green finance. But at the same time, the regulator has to do that. Now in the new strategy, climate is one of the pillar, but important that the regulator now is starting to interact and new policy can happen. So this is the role that we are playing, but at the same time, we do also role with specific institutions. For instance, Now we are finishing a project that we call designing a digital toolkit for women, gender toolkit to design product. We have working with financial institutions in order to insist with them and show them that it is possible to have specific products oriented to specific needs of women. And that initiative came for the work that we're doing. We do a lot of research. In our research, one of what we did based on FENScope, it was clear that the financial inclusion or the financial exclusion in Mozambique in the last 5 years has dramatically reduced. But the exclusion continued there. And then the question was, what was the most contributor to that exclusion, to that reduction? And we found out that it was the mobile, the digital, that give a great contribution. And the second question was, what was the segment of clients, of people that did? And the answer was women. But the gap is still there. So the question was, based on that knowledge, that women like to use digital, women have contributed to the reduce, what we can do in order to reduce the gap. In this way we are, and we mix what we get from the research for our investigation. We bring evidence not only for the regulator, but also for the financial institution. And this is the role that the FSD is doing. At the moment, we do have a specific project on that disaggregation, sex disaggregated data for SMEs, for small and medium enterprise, that we do not have at the moment in the country. We do only have at the individual level. So I see our role in different angles.
So thank you, Esselina. Actually, this brings me to this question of, I hear you say that technology has helped reduce the gender gap in financial services in Mozambique, and there's a lot of data backing that. But at the same time, this week was released the State of Mobile Connectivity report by GSMA, which shows that more and more people are accessing internet through their phones, and they're accessing financial services through internet on their phones. But that the big gap in awareness of access to internet through phones is in rural areas and for women, and so there is still a large gender gap. And in a way, you've just told us that digital is helping women, but there's also the risk of digital excluding women because they have less access to phones and less knowledge about phones. Can you speak to that? Maybe Farai, from your experience with the Securities and Exchange Commission in Zimbabwe, and then maybe Esselina, if you can comment.
Okay. Thank you, Aude, for that. And I think the point you raise is one which we are very interested in as a commission, because obviously we have a long way to go to raise awareness, and not just awareness, but access, and then following access, usage of capital market infrastructure and capital market investment and capital market products. So one of the things we've done as a regulator in an attempt to understand this very interesting contradiction, where technology and mobile telephony have, on the one hand, exploded this area, and inclusion has gone up exponentially. But on the other hand, those who've always been ahead now have the opportunity to go ahead even faster as a result of that, and leave behind those who are beginning to enter the space and create the same sort of distance that we had. But I mean, it's a fascinating area. But the area I want to zero in on is the issue that we have created a survey instrument which is looking at three primary areas. And this survey ultimately inputs and provides data that we need to create our capital market index. We look at three areas of attitude, starting with attitude, because we want to, actually we start with knowledge. We want to understand where at the basic level capital market awareness actually is, or financial market awareness actually is. And we administer this survey in every interaction that we have and on a permanent, ongoing, rolling basis on all our social media platforms and as our website. This week, starting tomorrow, we will be in front of under trees or in front of classrooms with schools. We will also be administering hard copies of the survey. The second dimension it wants to understand following knowledge is attitude. What attitude? What is it that you feel about the capital market? And of course, in there, or are issues of risk and whether or not you are averse to risk. And there's no part of the financial markets that represents risk as much as the capital market. And generally speaking, and I'd like to hear Esseline's thoughts through you, Aude, on women and risk taking, but we are not generally, and I'm generalizing grossly, we are generally not known as being risk takers. Obviously, because the volumes of money which we control are small, you cannot then be exercising huge risk appetites on small amounts of money, which primarily are deployed in a household sort of setting. So, the exposure to risk, the appetite for risk is way lower for women. Finally, after knowledge and attitude, we want to understand practice. And this is the question that you're asking me, or to say, so what are women actually doing in this space? As a general outcome, we are discovering that generally they invest smaller amounts relative to their male counterparts. Generally, their investment cycles are short-term and still display fairly survivalist type tendencies. But on the other side, we also have an slightly older profile, which is investing for longer, to the extent that they actually forget that they have any investments in the stock market, for example. So this is the area we also want to understand, to say, what is it you're actually investing in, over what periods, how much are you actually putting in, and what are you saving for? Because that also is a critical area that we need to understand. Because ultimately, the capital market is where you come to raise money as a business or as productive activity. It's a long-term deployment of capital in the process of producing something else. So we want to know whether women are using the capital market as a temporary savings facility, or whether indeed they are looking at it in a far longer term view to invest in assets, or ultimately even to use capital market infrastructure to capitalize their businesses, which they might feel are ready to be listed, publicly quoted, and benefit from the mobilization of money from the public in order to grow these businesses, which is possibly going a little bit further than you had anticipated. Aude?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Esselina, over to you, just to hear you about, Farai just told us about women's differences from men in terms of knowledge, attitudes, and practice to financial services and investments. Can you tell us about some of those differences in knowledge and norms and practices with technology and digital financial services in particular?
Yeah, yes, we are not the same. Yes, there are differences, and the important that we recognize and we approach in that way. I think this use of technology, although on one side is a very good opportunity, and is something that can also push us and contribute to accelerate the financial inclusion, we do have to recognize that there are risks. In particular, when we come to the cybersecurity risk that might be interconnect the use of data, or personal data for other purpose in terms of protection. This one has led us that for many years we have been talking about financial education, financial literacy, but now I think, and we think at FSD Mozambique, that digital literacy should be in the top of our activities, because most of the activities that are around usage of the mobile, usage of the digital, and all of us, we need to that. So it's a new stance that we want digital literacy, not just in terms of awareness, but also in terms of how secure, how we make secure, because if women they understand that they are not secure in that space, as Farai was saying, that they are not, they are averse on risk in somehow, they will not use, they will stop using because they will think that there are issue of their safety and the issue of their security for the transaction. So for me now, digital literacy related with cybersecurity is something that we do have to think. But as you mentioned, we still have a gap in terms of accessibility of the mobile phone. But I do believe that it is possible to bring phones at affordable way, and maybe using some models that from the capital market can come, that people that are paying their phone while they're already using. So we need to provide other facility of having access to the mobile phone. If we agree that mobile phone is not only for financial, it's not only for communication, can be a tool that can be used for different areas. So my view is that within in country as a government policy, we need to see how we have affordable and secure phone for the majority of people, including women. But most important will be how we use that tools in a very proper way, safety way, and also particular among young people.
Thanks. Esselina, maybe zooming back out, building on what Farai and you have just said, can I ask you back to this idea of insights from female leadership? Can you tell us how you think female leadership can translate into greater attention to the specific preferences and needs of women in financial services in Africa? Do you have any specific examples? Obviously, there's both your stories, but do you see that elsewhere within the financial sector, that when women are in positions of leadership, it translates into a better understanding of the barriers, the norms, and the practices affecting women? Maybe Farai, to
Yeah.
you? Oh, sorry, Esselina, you
No,
want to jump in?
yeah, I can jump. I can jump to that question. Yeah, I think the female leadership is in process, and we female that were already in the leadership, we do have maybe double, triple role to play so that we push the other females to come to that institution. For my experience, is in my position, I do have more opportunity to bring this issue of leadership by females in a very concrete way, and put in the debate. For instance, in my organization, the issue of diversity is coming in different way. Not only diversity in terms of gender, but also diversity for the people who have impairments. So we need to bring the debate of diversity and see that our society is made by diversity, and how are we taking that one. So I think having female in the leadership, the discussion of diversity is having another way of seeing, but will be important that we put evidence, and we show evidence and show how better we can bring more and more female in the leadership, but most important, how are we responding to the needs for the other that are not in the room or in the table that we are discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Esselina. Farai, over to you.
Thank you so much, Aude, and Esselina, thank you for setting a beautiful foundation for me. Simply to say, my experience, particularly in the decade that I was in microfinance as an investor, and as someone who was spending time with women in the various spaces that they were occupying, and in the ventures that they were borrowing from, I think women trust other women. And I think on the other side, we also learned that men will necessarily crowd out women even if you position your microfinance company as a pro-women business ethos, men will come in and they will endeavor to borrow, and they'll borrow big and default in similar proportion. But we did see a very definite trend towards women believing that a women-owned and run entity is for them. And therefore, we had very good information and education sessions with them. It doesn't mean that the value of their borrowing was significantly different, but I think the willingness to come through the door was positively massaged by the fact that they were women who they felt they could trust, who they felt understood their pain points, and were willing to structure and design, which takes us to the other point we discussed offline the other day, and were willing to design in sympathy with their particular rhythm. I wanted just to go back to that other point that we made about technology and how it includes but then excludes almost simultaneously. It is issues of cost, and I think in large swathes of Africa, it is still about the cost of connectivity. It is also about, I think, the effect of what remains the household routine, even if she is a gainfully employed professional person. At some point, it appears that the household, the children, and other responsibilities attributed to women have the effect of reducing the time and space that is available to her to consume the opportunity presented by technology and her mobile device. In other words, the more time you spend with your device and the various apps thereon, the more proficient and the more confident you become. And therefore, the more trusting and Esselina, the more likely you are to recognize cyber threats and to know what to do about them. I would say that if I am an example of a woman, the minute I come across a question that I feel is ambiguous about my participation, say, in registering for a particular site that I want to register for, if I feel the question is ambiguous and I'm not sure which way I want to answer, I just stop
Just
my
leave.
transaction.
Just no time to fight.
No time to fight it, no time to interrogate it, and terrified of doing the wrong thing. So I walk away. And when we imagine that if myself and Esselina, 2 out of 3 on this conversation are like that, what must the statistic be for women out there? So there are trust issues, there are time, pure time. And often if you're trying to maneuver your way on a device, which is basic, and the natural daylight has gone, which is why one of the issues that the microfinance company in which I was an investor, and I'm not an investor anymore, but I applaud the stance they have taken to bringing solar lighting to households as a complete unit, because that is when women ultimately get time to do some of their own transactions. When the household is now sleeping, the household is now quiet. But usually in most parts of rural Africa, for example, once daylight has gone, unless your device is friendly, you can't actually see what it is you want to transact. So there are many barriers. I know you asked us, Aude, about barriers earlier. Those are literally amongst them, and time and daylight become a big enemy and a big barrier. Thank you.
So actually, bouncing on that, can I ask you, how do you think that the female leadership in a financial institution translates into better serving women's needs as clients, but also as staff of financial institution? Do you think that women are more likely to implement gender inclusive policies in a financial service provider, for example? Do things like facilitating remote work or pay transparency help, and can they shape an organizational structure and an organizational culture? We know that financial services, at least in France, tend to be very conservative. So can you comment on that kind of the continuum between leadership, staff, organizational culture, and serving women's needs within financial services?
Okay. as you didn't say who start, I can again here start. It is a very deep question that you are putting, and the results of what we're doing are not going to be seen immediately. But for what I am seeing and what, based on my experience, is that first, being a female leader, you need also to recognize that you are not there just because you are leader. You have to show that you are there because you have behind you a lot of women that need also to benefit and also to be part of this inclusion process. So in saying that is that when you, for at least myself, when I'm there, I'm trying also to bring the voice of many people that are not in the room. And in that one, then you can contribute in changing policies, in changing how do we deal with these type of things. I will give you here an example, because we're doing a lot of things on gender and trying to show that it is important to say specific things, how the institution they need to respond to the gender component. At the moment in Mozambique, there is a process of designing a specific policy for financial inclusion for women. We do have the strategy in general, but we need to say what really we want in terms of financial inclusion for women. And I do believe that via that policy, will also allow the institution to see what are their contributions. So I think it is a good step to have a female as leader, but most important is what are we doing when we're there? And not forget that we're there also to bring the voice and face of many women that cannot be all of them in leadership. So our leadership has to impact them.
Thank you. There's a
Thank
question in
you.
the chat, and I want to really encourage those online to please continue posing your questions in the chat. There's a question in the chat about where to find funding for gender programs. And so the question is about Sahel, but I want to open it up, recognizing that you're respectively from Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and just ask you about this. We know there's a 1.7 trillion funding gap for women entrepreneurs. What can you tell us about mobilizing capital to fund a woman? Can you reflect on this funding gap? And those on the chat, please continue asking your questions.
Thank you. Or is it me?
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much
Question
for that.
for you directly.
Thanks, Esselina. So Esselina said women in leadership should never forget that they have a whole constituency that they represent, and therefore they must bring the voice and must bring the face of those who are not necessarily in the room. I totally agree. I also am convinced that women leadership without resources is setting up to fail. And a part of me believes that accepting roles of leadership must be done, regardless of where areas of difficulty might present themselves. But another part of me also says leadership without resources is not going to get us very far. And this is why I think some of our conversations tend to go around in circles. I say this because of the item that comes up from the Sahel Aude, and which we are reflecting on from our perspective here in Southern Africa. I have the opportunity to straddle the capital market, where capital raising is different to banking, where you access loans and microfinance, loans which come at a particular interest rate and with particular conditions. I am necessarily a proponent for the capital market, where it is about ideas. And I think that women do very well in spaces that offer the opportunity to advance based on ideas rather than traditional tools and matrices of deciding whether loans are going to be advanced or withheld. If pots of funding could coalesce around entities that are able to gather women with ideas and fund their ideas, and that these probably exist, but I am working on the basis that if we can't recognize them and if women are not advancing as fast as we would like them to, maybe not insufficient numbers of these entities exist. When women are leading and women are given the opportunity to design for women, it is my conviction that designing to fund ideas brought by women and then providing an ecosystem of what is usually called technical assistance, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Providing the technical assistance, which can then translate this idea to something which is bankable, is the term we usually use, but into an idea which can begin to trade, and in the process of trading, grow to an appreciable level where the capital market becomes a real option to list maybe on some of the smaller exchanges. In other words, why not bring other women with money, maybe an Esselina and her cohort, who have the ability to read about and get excited around an idea from a woman who's been given targeted capacity and who's now able to fundraise long-term capital to make her idea, which became a small business, into a bigger business and ultimately into an enormous business, supported by women and men if they should like the idea. And with the collection of fund managers, fund advisors, all sorts of resources that exist in the capital market, who can be placed at the disposal of these women in order to make their products market or listing ready. That removes the pressure of loans from a borrowing perspective. That means that the investor who has read the prospectus around the idea and what payback looks like, they will exercise the patience level needed, which women don't currently have in the funding structures that are available to them. Currently, no sooner have you borrowed than you're being asked to return this money. What business would you be doing which enables you to be returning at those levels and at that sort of pace and in the time scale provided? This is where the capital market potentially is the game changer. Admittedly, there is much more we need to do, but I think a woman in a leadership position with resources, supporting ideas, using the capital market, I think we could be onto something, Aude.
Thanks a lot. Esselina, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I want to comment on that. When Farai was speaking, and that's when I was reading the question coming from how to fund gender project, and really we need to have alternative finance and not only think on loans, on credit banking or banking credit. So I like this idea that we can here start developing a lot of business angels. The idea of having business angels that are women that they're capable coming and that can support either in terms of technical assistance, but also in order of putting money for this type of initiative. The other one is crowdfunding initiative. I think it's also possible to have, well, those ones that can invest and the one that can be invested in the trying to make that one in the ASO technology, and then in the level of development, then we can move on at the level of the real capital market. So hearing and thinking on capital market, maybe in the case of women and in the case of Africa, we need to have, how do you say, step by step until we reach the fully capital market, and with a different graduation process, how we move on block by block and see that one. So I fully agree with the perspective that Farai was putting in the tables, some things that we can think about.
So just a final question, we have 4 minutes left, 6 minutes left, sorry. I'd like to ask you each to react. We've talked about the role of financial service providers in their leadership. We've talked about the role of investors. Given you both have worked with the regulators, can I ask you about the role of the policymaker and how some policies have impacted favorably the access of women to financial services in your countries? Can you reflect on an example here and tell us a bit more about the role of the policymaker in serving women's financial needs?
I'll jump in first and make sure that I
Yeah.
leave plenty of time for Esselina. Part of my career, going right back, Aude, to those defining moments, your question speaks directly to one of the defining moments, and that was the deregulation of our financial services sector in the 1990s. And that enabled us to be able to, this is on the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, the banking regulator, that enabled new banks to enter the arena, whereas that space was previously occupied by traditional banks. For those who would know the history of Zimbabwe, we got independence in 1980 and have been independent since. And in 1990 came in this set of new rules to say, oh, we're not going to keep protecting old and established banks. There's a burgeoning population that needs to be financially included. The old and traditional banks probably have no appetite for it or no ability, the agility needed to do so. So let's open this up, license new banks, and let them do what they need to do. And I stand here as one of the beneficiaries amongst many millions of Zimbabwean women of the deregulation of the financial services sector. It wasn't all good news. There were some bank failures, but there were also those that survived up to the time that we are now. What did that do? I think it caused traditional banks obviously to wake up and say, oh, well, that wasn't great for us, was it? What should we be doing and what should we do better? But it also meant that you had this great new wave of new banks that knew that this market needs to be segmented. And in that segmenting, there are women who are underserved. And in the process of going about our business objectives, we will also be financially including women, and women also will become investors. Women will become business owners with access to loans, etc. And if I overstretch a little bit and make a comment about banking regulation, I would say that one of the very positive moves that they made was to say all banks must have a women's desk. And literally overnight, banks had to comply, and in they jumped, and the rest is history, as we say, Aude.
Thank you. Esselina, your wrap up.
I like this idea of women desk because right now, I and my other colleagues were discussing even to have a women desk, in particular for SMEs, because we want to move those SMEs. So, yeah, answering your question, I think that the policy level there is also a willingness and also a pushing to financial inclusion for women. It is why the national strategy of financial inclusion is led by the regulator. It is why we are seeing other type of policies. It is slow, not in the space that we want, but I do believe that we are going to see some difference, and I really think that will be possible. But we have to have in mind that financial space is the very high regulated area. And sometimes the regulation, sometimes the risk that we want to minimize might not be in the way that anyone want to do or wants to do that. In Mozambique, for instance, it was agreed in this by law that there is what we call basic account, so that we're not requesting all the KIC in the same level for someone who is in another level. So in that one, it's really a recognition that we needed to segment our market, we need to segment also the requirement and not be the all requirement valid for anyone. And that one for me is a good recognition that we are different. We still have to have also diversity in term of type of institution, financial institution, not only traditional bank. We need banks in the area maybe of development, dealing more with women needs. So I do think that in the coming year we will see some difference. Even within the already existing banks, they have to ask themselves how they can serve better the segment of women.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. With this, Farai, Esselina, I really want to thank you for sharing your inspirational stories, your experience. I heard about a lot of remaining challenges, but it does feel like there's a lot that we can learn from each other. So thank you. I want to encourage participants to stay with us and join the other sessions today. There are several. You've seen the program. There's some on female economy. There's the gender equality changemaker award ceremonies later today. It's a special day at Pathway to 17 in partnership with FinEquity Africa. I want to wrap up by encouraging us all to continue the discussion online, including through the FinEquity and DFI channels. So please join FinEquity Africa, stay on for the next sessions, and looking forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you.